Excellent. We are live to the world. So good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, and wherever you are listening in the world to this wonderful podcast, which is the Global Sales Leader. I have a very exciting guest today, which I'll introduce to you in a few moments. So this podcast is all about sales leaders, insightful leaders, some people that inspire something slightly different. People are extremely wonderful, I find, in the world. But when I speak to insightful leaders like my guest, Paul Magee, I get very, very excited. So welcome, Paul.
Hi, Jason. It's good to be joining you.
You were introduced to me, number one, by your book, which is How to Succeed with People, which I purchased a few years ago. And I read it, and you're very lucky because I don't actually buy physical books anymore. So I was interviewing a friend, a mutual friend and colleague of ours, and he said, "Oh, you must speak with him." And I was going, "Yes, I definitely will speak with him." So Paul, you're absolutely welcome. Like a little bit of blurb about you, I was absolutely set back by what you've done. So you're one of Europe's leading speakers on the subject of change, workplace relationships, motivation, communication, and so much more. You've got a plethora of 12 books, so you told me. That's incredible. That's well done on that. That's really good. And Sunday Times bestseller book on self-confidence reached in the W.H. Smith's books. You've also appeared on BBC. You're regular on the BBC radio, so I'd love to speak to you about that. Look, you've got a whole lot of other stuff, and I know Chris Evans has spoken to you about you very warmly, and Supply Woodward. So you've got a really good host of people that absolutely love and adore what you've done. So again, very welcome to
yeah. The key thing though, Jason, is what do my wife and kids think of me, and that's always got to be the key thing first of all, because it's great having all those plaudits, but and it is flattering and it is nice, but I've learned in life that probably with your plaudits will always come your critics as well. So at the end of the day, when I put my head down on my pillow, is my wife still speaking to me, and my kids still all right with me? And that's got to be the priority. The rest is all a bonus.
I think, especially nowadays, now that we've reached to the highest levels in Ireland and the UK, level 5, if you can get on with your family, you can get on with absolutely everyone. I totally concur. And are you getting on with your family? I'm sure you are.
Well, at one stage in what you might call now what was lockdown 1, I had both my son and his wife, and then my daughter and her partner with us as well. So there was 6 of us, and I didn't have to ring the Samaritans very often. We didn't need to go for marriage counselling, my wife and I. And in fact, I'm spending more time with my wife now than I ever have done, and so far so good.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that has taught us over the last 9 months or so is its connection, and it is really cementing that. And that's probably why and how you got the idea of your book, Yes, which I bought just before Christmas, and you actually had a link. You was on LinkedIn and did a video, and I went, bang, that's perfect time, because my daughter's around about that age where she needs self-discovery, internal self-discovery, and I think that was just absolutely bang on. Definitely the right time, and it hit. I think we discussed that in a little bit more detail. So Paul, sure, could you tell me a little bit more about you before you got into what you're doing, just so we can get a sort of richer understanding of those anchor points along the way that got you where you are today?
Sure. Well, I mean, my background is in behavioral and social psychology. So people have always fascinated me. I trained to be a probation officer as part of my degree. Didn't pursue that. Went into HR, was a Unilever graduate management trainee, worked with Birdseye Walls. And 2 main lessons I learned from that experience were, number 1, don't eat beef burgers that are cheap because I know what goes in them. And secondly, I learned that actually my degree had prepared me to graduate, but it hadn't prepared me to necessarily get the best out of myself, get the best out of others, and get the best out of life. Suddenly, it was like, I've got the qualifications, but have I got the people skills and the insights to get the best out of others? So that was a big learning for me. And I was a graduate management trainee with them when I was 24. Was only one of 4 graduates taken on by Unilever in the whole of the UK that year to specialize in HR. One of 4. So I'm really super excited. And yet, 24 years old, by the time I reach my 25th birthday, I'm no longer working with Unilever. I've lost my job and I'm claiming invalidity benefit. And I became ill with an illness called ME, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, or yuppie flu. Unfortunately, 8 out of 10 doctors didn't even think it was a genuine illness. That was a bit of a challenge. My doctor was one of them. He sent me to see a psychiatrist in Liverpool, which, if I'm honest with you, I found a humiliating experience. Not going to Liverpool, but seeing the psychiatrist. And it was over 3 years before I felt I might be well enough to try and do some work again, probably only part-time. Problem was, Jason, no one had hired me because I couldn't pass a medical. So here's what I did. I hired myself, and that was in 1991. And so I've been in business nearly 30 years in March of this year. So that's a bit about a brief background about me.
That's really interesting, actually, because since 1991, you worked on yourself and you worked as an entrepreneur. The key thing now is you've done an incredible amount of learning. So there's a lot of people that actually are sort of self-isolating. There's a lot of people now that are working from home, but you've been doing it for almost 30 years. So what are what makes you self-motivated to do stuff? Because I'm really quite fascinated with that, because you've been doing it almost 30 years. How have you done that?
Sure. Well, I think the thing is, my business is about selling me. I am the product. So, when I start off, let's be honest, my first year of self-employment in 1991, when we were in a recession in the UK and I was trying to promote the self-training, I turned over £2,300. My accountant sacked me and I paid no national insurance or tax. It wasn't exactly an auspicious start, but I got into personal development, and there was the late Jim Rohn. I came across this quote that said, "Work hard on your job, but work harder on yourself." And I realized the product I am selling is Paul Magee. And as I developed and started to do some training and then speaking, Jason, I don't have any amazing backstory. I've not climbed Everest. I've not got any gold medals to share with my audience. I've not overcome cancer. So it's like, what's your selling point? I haven't got, when I speak at a conference, I haven't got the safety net of celebrity to fall back on. To put it bluntly, I've got to be bloody good. So I've got to have a good message, but I've also got to know how to communicate it in a really engaging and captivating way. So for me, what's the drive? Well, maybe there isn't in a drive, and maybe that's something to do with my temperament. But at the end of the day, you want to create a great product that you're selling. I'm selling me. So I've got to work hard to make this the best product available and possible within the limitations that I've got, as well as the opportunities that I've got.
So, well, tell me a little bit more about that, actually, because this is the Global Sales Podcast, and it's all about leaders like yourself. How did you sell yourself, and what were the clear messages that you were doing? Because I believe that everyone is a salesperson. That's the way I look at the world. And I'm on a similar path to yourself, but I might be a couple of years behind you. So what are the key learnings there?
Well, one of the things is to actually say that we're all in sales, and most people don't think that they are. So actually, early on in my business career, I managed to win a contract to work with British Coal Enterprise, who was set up to help redundant coal miners to get jobs. And I used to do these, what they call these self-marketing workshops, a 2-day course. And the first thing we did on day one in the morning was look at the whole thing around salespeople. And I would say this phrase, okay, when you think of the word salesperson, what comes to mind? And they go, gift of the gab, manipulative, dishonest. There's quite a lot of negative stereotypes. And then I helped them to say, well, guess what? Maybe there's some positive qualities. And some of them was like saying, we're redundant coal miners trying to find jobs. Why are we talking about salespeople? I said, because you are all now have a job in sales, and the product you're selling is yourself. And I'm going to give you strategies and insights and tools to know how to sell yourself, because I'll say you'll go for a job and you'll be the best person for the job. But if you don't perform well at that interview, you won't get the job. So it's all about understanding, in a sense, your customer and knowing how to market yourself. And I suppose for years, really, it's like I've written 12 books. Someone said, what made you write your first book? Well, I suppose I liked writing, but that was no real big driver. The driver was obviously a bit of ego, but was also credibility. How do I make my voice heard in a crowded market? How do I stand out from the crowd? How can I, as a non-celebrity, still get people's attention that they sometimes, when they're doing a sales conference or whatever, go, well, I've Paul Magee. Well, when I've got those words author of, that starts to open some doors and brings a bit of credibility. So for me, I've worked with Sir Clive Woodward. Now, Sir Clive Woodward worked with me when England had already won the World Cup. And I'm like, so he's at the pinnacle of what he could achieve potentially. And yet he's a sponge, always open to learning. And for me, that's exactly how I am. I'm 56, 12 books, over 250,000 book sales, worked in 41 countries, over 1,000 clients. And I am still on this constant quest to learn. That's kind of it in a nutshell. It'll never stop until the day I leave the planet.
Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And I'm on the same path. And I think you can never, ever stop learning. I think there was a quote for me: the more you learn, the more you grow, and the more you can develop. And it's absolutely fascinating. I'm definitely on the same wavelength as yourself. So we've been in lockdown for, I don't know, we're back into lockdown again. Happy days. So what are the best tools that you can give back to people when they're all back into wherever we are now? And how better can we communicate to ourselves and to others?
Sure. I think one of the things actually to appreciate is first of all, start by saying, look, this is potentially pretty tough for most people. Some people, they're fine, they're thriving. They're like what I call the dandelions of life. That, those dandelions, I don't plant them, but they still end up springing all over the place. And some people are just naturally resilient and they're going to find this not actually that tough, but most of us aren't dandelions. And we need to first of all acknowledge this is a little bit tough. I'm known as a s.u.m.o guy, which can stand for shut up, move on, or stop, understand, move on. And one of my s.u.m.o ideas is hippo time is okay. So actually, what a hippos do in mud? They wallow. And sometimes we need a bit of a wallow. We need to digest our disappointment. And for a lot of us, there can have been a lot of disappointments in the last 12 months. Sit with your sadness, process your pain. All those kind of things are legit. So first of all, start by going, all right, this is a bit tough. Accept that, and accept that I'm not going to feel amazing, super amazing every moment of the day. And that's okay. The other point, though, is hippo time is all right, but it's temporary. It's a detour. It's not a destination. And what's going to help us is just to acknowledge, and it's not exactly something which people haven't heard before, is, okay, what can I control? What is in my influence that I can do something about? Now, for me, I'm a big believer in this concept of master your mornings. We're familiar with this phrase, all's well that ends well. Well, I embrace a different idea, which is all's well that starts well. So I know what the first 2.5 hours of my day look like. So the first hour is spent reading, reflecting, and learning. The next hour and a quarter is spent walking, either with my wife, or this morning I'm listening to Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, the TV doctor and author, and I'm listening to one of his podcasts. So again, I'm learning, but I'm also embracing nature. I've got a couple of live events happening today, preparing for those. But there's things that you're just going to go, okay, what is in my control? And, an analogy I often use is, life is a bit like going to McDonald's sometimes and looking at the menu and going, I'll have the lobster thermidor. Yet nice to have ain't on the menu. So I think a lot of people at the moment can focus on what they are missing and what's not on the menu at the moment. Well, fair enough, but that ain't going to take you anywhere. So you've got to look at what is on the menu, or can I create some new dishes from the existing ingredients that we've got? So, one of my little phrases, use it in the book for young people, use it in my s.u.m.o book, is, besides God, if you believe in God, the most important person you are ever, ever, ever going to talk to is yourself. We have by nature a natural disposition to be negative. Psychologists call it the negativity bias. So I have to work constantly on my daily diet of what I call my mental diet. Get the mind right, get that focus, get the body moving, and then take the rest from there. But you've got to build a foundation of what you can control.
Absolutely. I say it's working from the inside out. So it's working
100%.
subconscious, the subconscious level, and it's what my analogy is like a computer. Whatever you type into the computer will display on the screen, and it's similar to the mind as well. So whatever you say and suggest to the mind, that would be the answer. So if you program in saying negative thoughts to yourself, that's what's going to happen. But if you say positive things and constructive criticism on yourself and feed forward, the right things will happen.
I think this whole concept of mental diet, I think, is absolutely incredible. I mean, yesterday I actually was doing a live event in person, and I'm in this hotel, all COVID secure, etc., etc. They deliver my breakfast to me in my room, and I'm not doing my normal. I did my first hour of reading and reflection, but I wasn't going to do my morning walk. And I'm thinking, all right, I'm in my bedroom now. Shall I put the TV on and listen to the news? And the answer was no, I won't. I was doing a 3-hour seminar with a group of people, needed some real inspiration. And I just listened to a podcast instead, because what you consume, as you know, mates matter massively, but what you feed in your mind matters massively. And some people are like my wife. I'm not going to call her a dandelion at all, but she's just naturally resilient. She doesn't have to work on this as much as I do. I'm a bit more like an orchid. I'm a bit fragile at times, but I'm aware of that fragileness. And therefore, I work hard on myself. Going back to Jim Rohn, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And it's out of that overflow of what you've done in your own life. I think you're in a better position to help your customers, your clients, your colleagues. And when we think about your home life, maybe your kids as well.
And I think that's all about setting yourself up for success. So when we speak about leadership and when we speak about salespeople, it's really helping them get themselves cemented in a routine that will build that success throughout the day. And I think that's just absolutely incredible that you have to do that now. You don't have an hour's journey now to work. You don't have this, that, and the other. So that hour is that hour to work on yourself. Exactly what you suggested.
Well, I mean, Zig Ziglar, who will be known by many people, passed away a number of years ago. I got the opportunity to meet him some time ago. But he said something along the lines of motivation is a bit like having a wash. You've got to do it more than once to get the full benefit. And for me, this isn't about, strangely enough, I'm not a huge goal setter, but what is absolutely key to people's success is developing healthy habits. Because if you develop healthy habits on a daily basis, they automatically start to happen in a sense without even thinking about it. I don't think every morning, do I have an hour or so of reading and learning time? I just do it. I don't think when I'm around, am I going to go for a walk this morning? I just do it. So it's become a healthy habit. And my purpose and direction is set, so I don't have major goals, but I do have daily habits that over time, they have a compound effect. And I think they've made a difference. I started on ground zero. All right, it was 30 years ago, but it was ground zero. I wasn't even fully well. I'm trying to sell myself and my services in a recession. I got no credibility. And yet with a bit of passion and keep on working on myself, I've got to the point where I am now, which is still, to many people, not particularly successful. But it also depends on what you determine to be success. And for me, success isn't just about the size of your house, your car, or your bank account. It's ultimately about, are you fulfilled? Do you feel you've got meaningful work and you've got meaningful relationships? That's it in a nutshell for me.
Ironically, you said Zig Ziglar. I interviewed Tom Ziglar a while back, and he said suggested exactly the same thing. It is success means a lot of things to different people. But I think as long as you can wake up in the morning and you feel good and you're working on yourself and you do the exercise and you do everything else, your life can be successful. And, everyone has their own different paths, and the monetary value sometimes, as we know, isn't always the right thing. Steve Jobs died and, he was successful in his business life, but in his personal life, it was slightly different. So
Yeah,
it means a lot of things to different people.
it does indeed, and I think we just need to acknowledge that and let people get on with it. And when people start to say to me, "Who do you admire and who do you learn from?" I learn and admire from everybody. We're fortunate we have a lady who comes in once a week and does some cleaning for 2.5 hours. Well, she ain't got any qualifications. A bank account might be a lot smaller than a number of your viewers and your listeners, but she is a success in her own eyes, and I learn from her, and I listen to her, and then we're chatting away in the kitchen while I'm making a drink, and I learn from her. The guy who cuts my hair, although I don't know when I'm next seeing him, but I learn from him. And I think we should have an attitude. This is not a usual word to associate with people involved in sales, but humility can help you along the way. It really can. And being humble isn't therefore putting yourself down, but it's about remaining open-minded, being curious, and always being a student. And I just always want to be a student. And I think anyone I meet in life, I can learn from, even if sometimes they set a bad example, and I learn never to do that bad example myself. We're learning machines. We are meaning-making machines, and we're learning machines. So let's tap into that if you want to be fulfilled and successful.
I was looking at your accolade of books that you've written, and something that I go by anyway when I do training and coaching and stuff like that. But these two things on our head, for the audio listeners, I'm pointing at my ears, and listening is one of the best things that we can possibly have, and getting out of our own head and jumping into the other person and really in-depth listening to what the other person is saying. I think that's and looking at your books that you've written here, what are the key things that people can do to, especially salespeople, to elevate their listening skills?
I think in some ways it starts with attitude, because I can give you lots of techniques. You can talk about rapport and mirroring and all those techniques. I've never taught those techniques. I start with attitude. And for me, when I'm interacting with people, and again, a word you would not necessarily always think about in relation to sales or leadership is, I'm here to serve someone. So if you are interested in what I've got to offer, Jason, or any of your clients have, your listeners and your audience generally, well, that's great, but I need to see whether what I have to offer is what you need. Am I scratching where you're itching? And so for me, maybe, I said before, people have always fascinated me. So I am curious by nature. I want to hear people's backstory. And if I can therefore think, well, rather than I'm here to sell you something, but maybe I'm here to provide a solution or some support to a problem or a challenge you currently have, then I will automatically ask questions. But let me just say this as well. Yeah, you can listen, but actually listening isn't about silence. It's also about knowing what questions to ask as well, and to probe. And I think some people give you information, then you move on to your next question, rather than, well, tell me more about that, or exactly what do you mean. I remember this little acronym I learned years ago, which was called TED, TED, nothing to do with the website, but it was just simply tell me, explain to me, describe to me. And it was, and I'm very much, when people say something to me, I say, tell me more about that, or could you just explain that in more detail? When clients say to me, well, we need you to come and speak to our staff, morale's low. I don't go, oh, right, okay, morale's low. Tell me more about that. When you say morale's low, what do you mean? I want my client, my customer, to paint pictures. And what you sometimes also find out is when you say the staff are low, morale's low, you've got 100 members of staff and half a dozen of them are struggling. So there's 94 who aren't. It's like when people say to me, we've got quite a few people who are negative. Well, when you say you've got quite a few people, could you tell me, specifics, how many? So it's about listening, but it's also about knowing how to ask the right question as well. That is absolutely crucial. And if you're about helping your customer, serving them, serving your client, then it becomes less about selling, doesn't it? And more about providing solutions.
I totally and utterly concur with you on there. And I think selling is all about serving other people's. It is stepping into their shoes. It's really understanding them. Obviously, rapport and everything else goes into, but the best salespeople I've ever met is they're just really sort of natural. And there's no ego about them. They're just having a conversation with them. It's like they're having a cup of tea with them, like we're having a cup of tea with yourself right now. And I think that's
Sure.
absolutely extraordinary. I'm
One of
looking
the
at.
Sorry, I'm
Go on.
interrupting you, and we're talking about listening here, ha ha. But to interrupt you, if we could always remember, and most people have heard this before, but we have a number of psychological needs. We won't necessarily use these words to describe them, but if you can recognize people want to feel important, they want to feel understood. You can make people feel important by the way you deal with them. If you can make them feel understood, then you are a long way to helping, achieve what you want to achieve as well in that relationship.
Absolutely agree. Like, apologies for jumping in there, but no, I think you can actually carry on with that, because people do need to be understood. They need to be listened to. They need to be understood. That's why I sometimes feedback the questions that they've actually said to me, because it's like going into a restaurant and the waiter's going round, and then afterwards they repeat exactly what you've ordered in specific. And the better the restaurants that you go to, the more you're going to have Chateauneuf de Pape with your main course, and you're going to have your steak medium rare, and you're not going to have potatoes, but you're going to have veg in that, but you're going to have something else. And you go, wow, that's incredible to memorize that. But I think it's just a matter of respect.
It is. And I think also, for what I've realized, because I've done a lot of training in the past around customer service, and like we use a restaurant example, I've occasionally been unhappy with my meal. And I've said, I'm not really happy with that. And they go, well, but they almost interrupt me. I want to explain what it was about the meal. And they went, we won't charge you for dessert. Now, what I think we always need to remember is when we've got maybe a challenge, a complaint, there's two things we're thinking about. There's the problem you've got to deal with, but there's also the person. And occasionally I've had my problem dealt with, i.e., they interrupted me and said, we won't charge you for dessert, or you can have a free drink. But you haven't always dealt with me as a person, because I wanted to offload and tell you why I was disappointed or why I was unhappy. And sometimes I wouldn't have been after a free dessert. I wouldn't have been after a discount. I would have just been after, listen to me, make me feel understood, make me feel important, that kind of thing. And so, again, I think sometimes we just think it's about, how do I sell something? How do I sort a problem out? And at the end of the day, we're all, not just all in the sales business, we're all in the people business, whatever our sector is. And we just need to remind ourselves of that every flipping single day. We're all in the people game.
Absolutely. And there's a bit of research I actually posted out yesterday, but it's building those relationships. And, if you haven't spoken to your customer for a year, your customers are paying you or for your product or your service or whatever it might be. So go and speak to them. Go and understand why they bought from you in the first place, but also understand, do you need any help? Is there anything that we can help you, especially in these times? I think that big empathy hat needs to be put on, and really intently listen to them, because you can provide even better service or get a referral from them or something else.
I think, well, and the other thing is, I don't think we always educate our customers, and I'm guilty of this, on what we can provide, because I've been known since 2002, really, as the s.u.m.o guy. My main book that came out in 2005 and became the Sunday Times bestseller was called s.u.m.o, Shut Up, Move On. My brand is, I am the s.u.m.o guy. And I think some people still, as customers, go, yeah, we had s.u.m.o, it was great, loved it. But they don't always think about, actually, I've applied s.u.m.o and a lot of my other ideas around leadership, around resilience, around customer service, around mental and emotional well-being. So sometimes asking a customer, how are you? And they go, well, we could really do with some stuff around resilience. They don't necessarily automatically think about me, because they pigeonhole me as, well, you're the s.u.m.o guy, you're the motivational guy. And suddenly I go, no, well, that's what I mainly talk about. It's about resilience. It's about leadership. It's about, I've got this phrase, well-being leads to well-doing. So, of course, you want to maximize the performance of your staff and them to do well. But for them to do well, they need to be well. So me looking at well-being is not some nice little pink and fluffy thing where we talk about unicorns and rainbows. It's crucial to people's effectiveness in what they do. And so sometimes it's about, ask for, how can I help you? But also asking that question might also then help you to educate your customer or client on how you can help them, because they may have put you in a pigeonhole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that sometimes happens when you're in a particular space. They don't realize other stuff that you do until they have that conversation with you and go, well, how this all came about, especially for you, is I suffered from illness and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
I needed mental resilience. I needed this. Without that, I couldn't be here talking to you right now. Without that, so I
totally.
can educate you going forwards. I think that's incredibly empowering.
One of the things that's a big challenge for many organizations at the moment is this whole concept of uncertainty. It's not so much as change, it's the uncertainty and the pace of it. When I was ill with ME, I would improve. I'm thinking, I'm getting over this. And then I'd relapse and improve and relapse. So I was constantly living with uncertainty. And so I can still take lessons I learned from that illness 30 years ago and apply them to life now. We're living in uncertain times, but there are things in our toolkit. It's like people say, what do you do? And I say, well, on one level, I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I'm a coach. But another metaphor I sometimes use is when you go to a builder's merchant, it's because you want some supplies to help maybe build your kitchen, build your house. When you go to your office supplies, it's because you want to make your office more effective. For me, I feel like I'm like your life supplies specialist. I am just here to share some tools, insights, and some inspiration to help you build a better life, both in your work and in your personal life. That's kind of what I do.
So you build the foundation and they build the house.
I give them, well, I don't even know if I build the foundation. I just say, look, here's what, if you want to build a house, here's what you need to be aware of. Mm-hmm. And here's some tools to help you build it. But you do the design yourself. You lay down your own foundation. I don't do a lot of coaching. And I found that when people say, oh, well, if you're going to work with me, we need to book in 10 coaching sessions, etc., etc. I find very often after about 2 coaching sessions with people are in a much better place and say, actually, I think I'm all right, because I don't want people to be dependent on me. I'm not going to build your house. I'm not going to coach you through your life. I'm going to give you the tools you need, the insights, the inspiration, but I'm going to empower you to do it yourself. It's like s.u.m.o has now become a concept in schools, s.u.m.o for schools. But again, it's not prescriptive. And I love how, head teachers apply s.u.m.o in their own schools to help kids. So I'm very big on empowering others, not just saying, this is the prescription. It's like, no, build what you want to build. I've got something here that you could use. I found it helpful for me. I probably worked with about, 1 million people in 30 years. They seem to have found it generally pretty helpful. So here's some stuff, but go create, make your own magic. That's what I'm about. Not saying this is how you need to do it. Follow me. No. Give them the tools, give them the insights, give them the inspiration.
And talking about that is getting our leaders of the future all ready and set in this time that we have to learn and grow. Our offsprings, our children, and our children's children is the time. And I say that because, again, I heard you on LinkedIn in December, and you have just published a new book called Yes. And I think it's, I know this is all about sales, and but it's also about people. And it's also about giving something back to our kids. And your book, Yes, I'm pointing at for the audio listeners that can't actually see me pointing. It's Yes, the s.u.m.o secrets to being a positive, confident teenager. Because these are leaders of the future. And I've been through it with my daughter, and I'm still going through it. She's 11. So, but there's lots of wonderful things in there to really help and engage our people for the future in these challenging times. But it's there to learn internally and to help them grow and move forward. So thank you for that. It's a gift, really, which I gave my daughter. So could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that as I say, I'm the author of 12 books, and I often say my first 11 were adult books. And I go, don't get too nervous about them. I say adult books; they're not of the 50 Shades of Grey variety. But I'd set up the s.u.m.o for Schools Foundation, a non-for-profit organisation to help provide tools, resources for schools. But my publisher was saying, look, it'd be great if you could do a book for kids. And then I was hearing people say, yeah, but you won't get kids to read it. And I mean, obviously some people are listening rather than watching, but the book itself became something where the design, those of you who are watching, where there's so many images on each page. I said to my publisher, I'll work on this with you, but we cannot go for black and white. It has to be full color. And what I've been amazed at is trying to sell a book in the middle of a global pandemic isn't the easiest of things. And it's my fastest selling book ever. And I've just had to look at various resources and ways to engage with people. I've got schools now saying we want 100 copies. We designed some posters that schools are using. And it was just a question of, look, I went through, some people have gone through a pretty good, happy childhood. Mine wasn't. It was a very dysfunctional childhood. You know, went to 4 different primary schools and ran away from home at the age of 10. You know, this isn't like nice, cozy, comfortable middle class story here. But even if you've had a good childhood, you know, I think we can learn lessons and acquire beliefs aren't always that hugely helpful. And school, I think it's changing now, but in my day, it prepared you for exams. It didn't prepare you for life. Absolutely. And so I wanted to create something that will outlive me and outlast me, because this book is not a great book for now. It's a great book forever. Every child, probably from the age of 9 through to 19, you could argue, could find this book of value, because it's the lessons I've learned that were in my Sunday Times bestseller, s.u.m.o, but putting them in a way that can be engaging for young people, use lots of color and illustrations, probably use a few less words. But remarkably, my son, right, he's a doctor. He's a pretty bright guy. He's 27. I've written 12 books. He said to me last week, Dad, the first of your books that I've read from cover to cover was your Yes book. I went, Matt, it's aimed at kids. He said, I know, but actually, I'm not a great reader, and loads of people aren't. And he said, but I've read it all the way through because it was so engaging, and because it was colourful, and because, in a sense, you just get to your point so quickly, Dad. And I'm thinking, I know it's aimed at young people, but if you've got any of your listeners and viewers who go, well, I don't read books, get Yes. Don't get any of my other books, just get Yes, because I think that will activate your desire to read a little bit more, because it's almost like bite-sized wisdom, and it's been packaged in a way that is super appealing for adults, but the emphasis was for children. And the other thing schools are saying to me is, you know what's great, Paul? It's not an online resource. We actually want children to physically hold something. We want parents or carers to read this book with their own kids, and actually has this sense of a beginning and an end. I've finished the end of the book now. Whereas stuff that's online, which is great, but there's almost this sense of, well, it never ends. And rather than scroll on a screen, you've got this chance to actually physically hold and feel this book. And hopefully when your daughter's even a bit older, she might revisit some of these ideas, particularly when she gets maybe some challenges through her adolescence. And, you know, I'm just passionate about the book. I mean, I've written 12 on one level. I don't really mean this, but if someone said to me, you'll never sell a single copy of any of your other 11 books, but it will guarantee that your Yes book is the most successful, would you take that? And I'd go, yes, I would. Because for me, this is the most important book I've ever written.
I think you're absolutely right. And I like the way it's done, because it's all in as humans, we're lazy creatures. We want the easiest route from A to B. So what you've done is you've made it nice and colorful, which is appealing, but it's also bite-sized chunks. And that's how we learn, and that's how we are, because our attention span is like 20, 30 minutes, and then we start thinking about something else, and our brain goes off in another direction. But bite-sized chunks is how the best way that as adults and as kids and teenagers is the best way to learn. And that is absolutely awesome for what you've done.
I think with all the books, so I just briefly, just to interrupt, I think with all the books, what I've also tried to do is like How to Succeed with People. But again, no long chapters. And do you know what also I do in my writing? I try and weave in some humor, and I always weave in personal examples. And learning, you know, reading. There's some amazing books that I've got in my bookcase that I've never read, because there's amazing content in there, but it's heavy, it's content rich. I need content, I need wisdom, but can I have a
That
bit of
one
a laugh as well?
particularly, yeah. I've got the
Yeah.
mind gym, and I keep going back to it every now and again. I still have. I've had it for about 10 years, and I'm still going back to it. But it's very heavy on the head. It's a good book. Don't get me
Oh yeah,
wrong.
there's some brilliant stuff. And I guess I am more, if you've got a PhD and you're pursuing academia, then don't read my books. But if you're a busy parent, just a busy person, but you want something that you go, I just need some inspiration, and maybe you'll make me laugh and you'll make me think. And maybe I'll relate to you, not just because of the content, because of the examples you give, then then my kind of books are right for you. They're not right for everybody.
Well, as we know, stories are the best way to engage with people. It stokes the imagination, and according to neuroscience, we have something in there with the mirror neurons. You relate it back to yourself, as much as it might not be about you, but it's about the other person. But you can get some sort of synergy there. And I find that's the most powerful way to learn and grow. And you've done that really succinctly, and if I can say it properly, but you've done it really, really well. And it's very clear. And I applaud you for that. So happy days in that. So, question I want to ask you, and the question I asked you, if you had a special power, and I relate this to a movie that I saw last year on Netflix, but they give you a magic pill and it gives you a superpower, but it only gives you 5 minutes. How would you use it, and what would you use it for?
What would my superpower be? It's a great question, but in some ways, my superpower is one that we all can have. And it's simply to ask ourselves some good questions. And a question I ask myself every single day, probably only just started doing it recently, but I just find it's helpful, is how can I best serve the world today? Sounds incredibly, incredibly cheesy. I get that. But how can I best serve the world today? Maybe it's the fact that I rang a friend up today to congratulate him on his new book. Jeff Ram wrote a book on celebrity service. Brilliant. How can I best serve the world today? Ring him up and encourage him and show some appreciation. How can I best serve the world today? Look after myself so that I can, I've got this phrase, to be at your best, you need to rest. So sometimes I need to do that. And then how can I best serve the world today? Put something on LinkedIn, contact a client, do these live events I've got today to the best of my ability. So it's not really a superpower, it's a super question. And I think if we keep asking ourselves that, then we don't get too inward looking, thinking always about our needs. We start thinking about the needs of others as well, whether that's in personal or our professional lives. And what you'll find is when you start to show a bit of kindness and generosity to other people and you're trying to help them, then you get big payback and payoff as well. So yeah, not a superpower, but it's a super question.
That is incredible. Love that. The reason why I do these podcasts is to feed forward, and interviewing people like yourself is to have golden nuggets so that people can learn and people can grow. So I really appreciate this, and I really appreciate these conversations because it's been really special for me. And
Great.
what I want is for people to learn out of this, whether it's through your book or whether it's through your golden nuggets of information that you give into the world, which is absolutely incredible. So thank you for that.
Well, Jason, it's my absolute pleasure to do so. And if people want to carry on connecting with me, if they're on social media, you can get me on LinkedIn or on Twitter at the s.u.m.o guy. Find me on LinkedIn as well. And, my website, the s.u.m.o guy.com, will hopefully provide some insights for you as well. So, that's my question I'm asking myself. How can I best serve the world today? And if that means I get a chance to connect with a few more people, share some stuff that they find of value that helps them build a better life, then all good.
Awesome. So thank you very much again today. My guest is Paul, and he's the s.u.m.o guy. He's got a plethora of wonderful books out there. You've listened to Jason Cooper. I'm your host, sales training coach. I help deliver exceedingly wonderful results for wonderful people. And thank you again, Paul. You've been absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Appreciate that.